Okay, and so we looked at, freezing water, freezing oil, does it get bigger, smaller? Does the volume change? How do the densities compare? I mentioned, there might be sort of another way to compare the densities of liquid versus frozen oil and water. So I've got here two identical glass containers, and this is a jar of coconut oil, and maybe I'll put either C for coconut or O for oil on this one. And then I've just got some water here, and so maybe I could write H2O, but maybe I'll just put W for water because it's a little bit easier to write on the second picture, just on the second glass, just so we can keep track of what's what. I thought you might like to see the coconut oil being poured in. It's clear like water, but maybe you could get the sense it's a little bit thicker than water. You can see there's a few like air bubbles kind of hanging out. They'll rise to the top, but again, it's oil. It's not water. Maybe I'll just leave the coconut oil jar there for comparison. And now we're going to fill this one up with water to about the same height or so. Doesn't have to be exactly the same. Now again, we got the same amount of oil and water. We could freeze them, see which one goes up, see which one goes down. Now, I've set up this experiment slightly differently. And I'm now walking over to my freezer, and I've got here an ice cube tray, right? And these ones here that are clear, that look like ice, they are indeed ice. So we have an ice cube, and we put it in the water. And you might have seen this before, right? The ice is going to float because ice is less dense than water. Now, these two remaining cubes are not ice cubes. Rather, they are frozen cubes of olive oil. So it's slippery. It's kind of like butter. I can almost make it melt. It's not quite the same as the coconut oil, but I thought maybe we'd see the color difference a little better. And you see now that the frozen oil sinks to the bottom, right? The frozen water rises to the top, right? So again, water is one of these kind of weird substances that expands. It gets less dense as it freezes. A lot of other substances, right? The solid is more dense than the liquid, and our frozen olive oil cube sinks to the bottom. You can kind of maybe see it's already melting though, because these liquids were at room temperature. So that's kind of another way to simply test the density between a liquid and a solid, right? We got the float test. If it floats, it's less dense. If it sinks, it's more dense. And again, we can compare liquid oil and liquid water versus their frozen oil and frozen water. Got the oil cube sinking. And again, the ice cube, you can see it there kind of floating on top, yet this experiment is over. We are melting away. Not going to be much to see in another minute or so.